And as we count down to that encounter, let's also take a look at how such summits have played out in the past, right from the YALTA Conference of 1945, where Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin chalked out an end to the Second World War, to the 1985 Geneva Summit, where President Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev discussed an end to the Cold War, the frosty Obama-Putin Summit of 2016, and the too friendly Trump-Putin Summit in 2018. Here's a report on the history of US-Russia relations and the presidential encounters that have shaped them.
You know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
I do.
A few weeks ago, Joe Biden called Vladimir Putin a killer who will shortly pay the price.
You know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
Now he's calling him a bright, tough and worthy adversary.
He's bright, he's tough, and I have found that he is as they say, when he used to play ball, a worthy adversary.
The US president's evolving remarks on his Russian counterpart are symbolic of how Russia and America have dealt with each other for decades, containing differences that can spark a conflict, agreeing to disagree to prevent the world from slipping into chaos. The first presidential meeting was that of allies. America and the Soviet Union fought the Second World War as allies. In 1945, when Nazi Germany was nearing defeat, they met to discuss ways to end the war. US President Franklin D. Roosevelt was joined by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill as he met with Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin in the Crimean town of Yalta. The three men chalked out an end to the World War. What followed was the beginning of the Cold War. Within 2 years, Washington and Moscow were on the opposite sides. The next big meeting took place 4 decades later. After 40 years of a bitter Cold War and stockpiling of nuclear arms, US President Ronald Reagan met Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev at a summit hosted in Geneva, Switzerland. The two leaders, who are said to have shared a good chemistry, decided to embrace the idea of common security, a term used to assert how the two sides can find security only through cooperation and not conflict. This summit led to the mutual reduction of nuclear armament and improvement of diplomatic ties.
Mr. President, do you agree with your Chief of Staff that...
Some say it may also have laid the groundwork for the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. In 2001, the newly appointed US President George W. Bush traveled all the way to Slovenia to meet the newly appointed Russian President Vladimir Putin. This summit was aimed at resolving differences spanning decades. The warmth between the two new faces in global politics surprised many. A few months later, in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, Putin is said to have been one of the first world leaders to offer Bush support in the war against terrorism. But the friendship didn't last. America's support for NATO enlargement is said to have angered Russia. Moscow later objected to the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. In 2016, outgoing US President Barack Obama had a frosty interaction with Putin, who had now been in power for 16 years. Their meeting took place on the sidelines of the G20 summit in China. Russia's territorial aggressions in Ukraine, its ongoing crackdown on domestic dissidents, and rumors that it was seeking to meddle in the 2016 US presidential polls cast a shadow on the discussions. This was illustrated by the ice-cold stares the two men gave each other. But if Obama saw Russians as clear-cut villains, the next president's attitude seemed quite the opposite. In 2018, Donald Trump met with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and contradicted all notions of Russia meddling in America's internal affairs. The notion of an American president giving Putin's denial more importance than the work of the US intelligence community angered many. Trump was forced to walk back on his comments. Putin, who has been in power for 20 years, will now be meeting his fourth US president in Joe Biden, who will naturally be coming with a list of grievances. Is Biden's changing tone an indication of America's changing approach? We shall learn soon enough. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.